From time to time, I get referred to the works of a lady named Seekaview Hutchinson, and I'm invited to read her thoughts, and I've always declined, not because she's black or a woman, but because she's a retard. So here she is on a panel with Ophelia Benson of Butterflies and Wheels from Free Thought Blogs, Jennifer McCrite, rhymes with wrong, who blogs as Blaghag or Bloghog. It's hard to tell them from Free Thought Blags. And then there's Rebecca Watson, who is from another planet. And here they're discussing why it is that there is an underrepresentation of women and other minorities, as though women are minorities. Hint, ladies, you're 51% of the population, a minority? That isn't. Anyway, why they're underrepresented in atheism. And it has something whatever to do with the fact that the atheist community, unlike the religious institutions, don't have the same sense of community and provide the same kind of services. And I hate to be the bearer of good news, but some men are aware of this. Some of them are even white, I'm told, and to include the homophobic, misogynistic, patriarchal, child-raping Richard Dawkins. Oh wait, was he raping a child, or was he raped as a child? It's hard to remember when you listen to Blaghag tell the story. Oh wait, yeah, he was the one molested as a kid. Blaghag, by the way, keep lecturing Richard Dawkins how he doesn't understand what it feels like to be a victim of sexual violence. Alright, you dumbass? So anyway, they go on to explain why this is. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Richard Dawkins has paid for childcare at atheist conventions in perpetuity. How that ties in with the whole Richard Dawkins is trying to oppress women bit as a patriarchist, I'm not sure, but they'll thread that needle when they have to. Anyway, so Seekaview explains why it really is. It's the canonization in the academy of the institutionalization of the Four Horsemen model, which the Four Horsemen model is, she elucidates, is the institutionalization of the scientistic, white supremacist, patriarchal oppression of women and people of color by the white guys, to include the late Christopher Hitchens. Now, I will say that some people on that panel were not going to sit to hear that kind of nonsense. Richard Dawkins is definitely not scientistic. A white supremacist, yeah. A patriarchist, yeah. An oppressor of women and blacks, yeah. But he is not scientistic. Ophelia, take it away.
So these are all things that need to be looked at in terms of the institutionalization of atheist scholarship as a canon that is accepted within a certain segment of mainstream America now. We have, obviously, the Four Horsemen of Apocalypse model, superstar white male atheists that have institutionalized a very narrow, prescriptive, white supremacist, patriarchal version of atheism for the masses. So those are all things that foreclose greater representation of diverse communities.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I agree with what Seekaview just said. I'm not sure that the male, the Four Horsemen at least, and the male-dominated version of atheism is scientistic. I think that's kind of a slur that gets thrown at them a lot.
I'll turn it over to Seekaview.
Actually, I want to approach this by really looking at why it is that African American and Latino women are some of the most religious folk in the United States. And that will get to why it is women are underrepresented within mainstream new atheists, secular humanists, what have you. What are the needs that the church provides for women of color? Well, going back to the points that I articulated earlier, you have communities that are under siege with regard to the lack of living wage jobs, with regard to policies of educational apartheid, with regard to the gross representation of young people in foster care systems and amongst the homeless. And what institutions are fulfilling those needs for the most part for the mass numbers of working class Black and Latino folk in the United States? It is, in some degree, church institutions. So if we look at it conversely, where are the radical, progressive, secular, humanist organizations and institutions that are going to fulfill that role in Black and brown communities? They don't exist. So that's one point. The other point is we have to look at the degree to which new atheism has been powered by this fixation on scientism, which has, in many regards, excluded radical progressive voices of color and feminist voices, emanating from the academy. And obviously the academy is dominated by European Americans in terms of those who have tenure, in terms of those who have prestige and status and are getting publication contracts. So these are all things that need to be looked at in terms of the institutionalization of atheist scholarship as a canon that is accepted within a certain segment of mainstream America now. We have, obviously, the Four Horsemen of Apocalypse model, superstar white male atheists that have institutionalized a very narrow, prescriptive, white supremacist, patriarchal version of atheism for the masses. So those are all things that foreclose greater representation of diverse communities.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I agree with what Sakivu just said. I'm not sure that the Four Horsemen at least, and the male-dominated version of atheism is scientistic. I think that's kind of a slur that gets thrown at them a lot by people who resent science itself and the idea that science is a good thing, and that thinking, not just scientifically but also empirically, wanting things to be evidence-based, and basically using reason and using skepticism, and basically relying on the idea that you should have good reasons for thinking something as opposed to just taking somebody's word for it throughout your life. I think that's the core thing that's at issue here, and that's central to new atheism, and I don't think that does exclude either women or people of color. And I think we should be very wary of buying into the idea that it does, because if we do that, we're basically sort of reinforcing the idea that women and people of color are somehow enemies of reason and of evidence-based thinking, and above all, of accepting the idea that if you say, I know this to be true, or I have the absolute truth, or I have this belief and you have to respect it, that you need to offer reasons for it. And that's a pretty minimal requirement, and I don't think it's either gender-based or class-based or race-based. I think it's just a basic human value that we need to defend.
So, actually, I want to respond to that, because scientism is not a rejection of science. Scientism is a critique of the degree to which science has been positioned as this regime of totally objectivist knowledge. So the issue is that there are scores of scientists of color, as well as secular humanist thinkers like Anthony Penn, who comes to mind, that have critiqued the regime of scientism and the degree to which that has foreclosed an examination of how, say, Western Enlightenment emerged from a very specific trajectory of imperialism, of colonialism, of the subjection of bodies of color as objects of knowledge, as basically the antithesis of the universal white subject of reason, of empiricism, of positivism. And scientists like, for example, Joseph Graves, who wrote The Race Myth, that I really recommend. It's an excellent book. He's a biological anthropologist, evolutionary biologist, that is. You don't really see his work referenced within a new atheist, secular humanist context. Pushes back against this notion that somehow reason and critical thinking exist outside of a specific historical, political, and cultural context. So that's where radical progressive humanists of color are coming from when we push back against scientism, not the concrete verities of science in terms of science being a discipline, okay, not science literacy. All of those are things that radical progressive humanist feminists of color espouse. Scientific materialism is something that we espouse. But it's important to understand that peoples of color, the bodies of people of color, have always been situated within this context in which we were positioned as being the racialized and sexualized others within these constructs of the supposed transparency and veritudes of science.